Welcome back for another episode of The Voice of Generation Climate, The Voice of Gen Z. This is episode number 26. And we're doing it as a way to wrap up our year. We've had a really long year at Climes. A lot has happened. And we thought the single best way to cover and share the stories of, whatever's been going on at Climes is through this audio-visual format. And in this episode, we're actually calling in a couple of people from within our team who've been working on the core problems across our value chain, across the demand side, the supply side, even the finance side, even the tech side. And you're going to hear about how we've built product, the learnings we've had along the way. And this episode is really going to be an evolution of Climes through the last 1 year. So starting off with me is Sabah. Sabah, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Sabah. I'm currently on the growth team at Climes, but I've been here for over 2 years. So I've done a bit of marketing, bit of product, bit of design right at the beginning as well. You would have seen me before on a couple of episodes. But I'm very excited to be on this one specifically because we get to talk about some fun highlights from the year that we really enjoyed. Just as a brief overview, like moving into our new office, some of the events we've been attending, and some good achievements that have happened for our team members as well, like Sid's Forbes 30 under 30 win. And also alongside the evolution of the company, also excited for you guys to hear about how we've seen the market and industry develop over the year and how we've kind of been adapting and adjusting to what we've seen in the market. And yeah, thanks for having me, everyone.
Thanks, Sabah. And for those who don't know me, I am Anirudh, one of the co-founders here at Climes. And let's get started. So Climes is a 2.5-year-old company. 2.5 years from the time we actually started off as a project. It was called Project Climes initially. And for 4 to 5 months, we ran an experiment to see that would the world care about carbon neutralizing whatever emissions we had. So we started off by doing an event, an online virtual event, and that kind of was successful for us to turn Climes into a company in December 21. It's been 2 years ever since, and a lot has happened. We started off our company being a climate finance company with the singular goal of bringing far more money into carbon removal. And our belief from the very beginning has been, God, there's too much carbon in our atmosphere and our oceans. We need to significantly ramp up our effort of removing this carbon. And that means building carbon removal projects everywhere. And to build them, we need a lot of capital. So that's why Climes was born as a climate finance company. But through this episode, you're going to learn about that evolution, what happened along the way, and from finance, how we've actually ended up becoming a project developer company. But before we get there, let's talk about how we bring capital. Sabah, why have we gone after the capital problem? What is the finance question over here? Let's talk about the incentives it takes to actually bring in this money. So start right at the top.
I think something that Climes has always believed from the beginning is that as a climate finance company, our job is to bring money from where it is in the world to where it needs to be. Like you just mentioned, where it needs to be is high quality carbon removal projects. But the big question is, where is that capital actually? And I think we've identified over the last 2 years that there's sort of an ecosystem of players who all have capital that can be directed towards climate. And it's just a question of unlocking those different sources of capital one by one. So as a company, we started with consumers as the first source of capital, where a lot of the products that we built right at the beginning, the kind of messaging and comms that we were building, the brand that we built, was all focused on how to convince an individual consumer, like possibly a listener for this podcast, about how to contribute to climate and why they should contribute to climate. And then along the way, we then moved on to consumer brands, onto enterprises, and then finally institutions. And at each target audience, we have figured that there are different ways to incentivize that person or that organization to actually want to contribute to climate. And I feel that the products that we've built have kind of evolved with this question and goal in mind as well.
Yeah, and I think this year has reaffirmed our belief that the world is not short of capital. There's actually a lot of money in the world. It's just not incentivized to flow into this space. I remember early on, lots of people used to keep saying, oh, not enough climate finance, not enough climate finance. That's actually not true. There's a lot of capital waiting to come into solving for, climate. It just needs to be rewarded for doing so. And that reward can look very, very different, right? For an impact capital person, it's very different from a commercial capital person, from a consumer, from an enterprise, very, very, very different. So how do we actually build relevant product that incentivizes people and institutions to want to spend money on this problem, right? And increase their climate wallet share.
Yeah.
And this year, way more people are talking about it. Still not as much capital as we wanted going into the space, but we have definitely made a little bit of a dent in improving climate wallet share, right?
Yes.
So if you start with that consumer brand play that we kicked off with 2 years ago, give us a little bit of a journey and a progression with the products we built and how we've got to December 23.
We started off with a Climes API product, which basically we found that if we want to convince consumers to contribute to climate, the best way to help them understand their carbon emissions or to help them want to neutralize their carbon emissions is to associate a carbon footprint with an activity that they're doing. So to do this, we figured the best way to reach a consumer would be through their favorite brands. So do you take a flight? What clothes do you buy? What food are you eating? Do you know the carbon emissions of your everyday activities, and would you like to offset them? Based off of this, we built an API for various consumer brands to implement carbon neutral checkouts for their consumers. So as a consumer is buying from your company, they have the option to neutralize the emissions of their product or service. And that was basically the first sort of product that we built. As time went on, in this product's journey, we did realize that a lot of companies sell offline and have interactions with their consumers offline as well, not just on a checkout. And in order to accommodate and adapt to this, we then built Climes Lite. Climes Lite allows for an offline play by distributing the same carbon neutralization experience through physical QR codes on tags on products themselves and in front-facing shop stores as well. So that's the evolution of API and Lite. And then I think parallelly alongside another product, which is also my favorite, and which we've also talked about before in many episodes, is the carbon neutral events product, which of course started because we wanted to make climate action more of a community experience where people could do the Climes voting experience, choose projects they want to support, and see how other people around them were experiencing the same thing. Influence each other, start a conversation, talk about it. And we then turned that into the carbon neutral events product, which is now being used by big corporates for their AGMs, by organizations that want to teach climate, and even private parties.
Weddings as well.
And weddings, yes. Yeah.
Yes. With a wonderful partner, Devika and Narayan.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've always chosen the partner route, right? Rather than going direct. We work with partners who can help then accentuate their own product by adding a carbon neutral layer on it.
Yeah. And I think also the key in the development of those three products is that each of them has kind of adapted to very different industries. And the products themselves are quite malleable to the needs of the company and that company's consumers. Like an events product is very open for a wedding. It can be interactive. It can also be quiet if you're doing a corporate AGM. Same with the Lite and API products. They're quite adaptable to whatever incentives or needs a particular customer might have.
Yeah. Specifically on the API one, like I've heard a lot of people ask us about, how do you get that wedge in and where do you see a lot of adoption? So with which segment of consumers do we see adoption? And, I think if you can talk about what we learned with the consumer pays option versus the brand pays option, and then how we've picked up insights to actually double down on 2-3 categories for the API play specifically, right? How about that? Give some color to that journey as well.
So like I mentioned before, we had initially started with trying to convince consumers to finance these projects. But what we realized over time is that it's actually the brands that should be playing the hero role of the change maker, and the brands as organizations and companies that have access to such large amounts of the population, they should be the ones to drive the change and be the ones to finance the projects themselves and then bring the consumers along with them. And we found that to go from the brand pays route as opposed to the consumer paid route was actually really beneficial because individuals then loved the brands more, they wanted to participate more, and they were much more excited about the climate action that was being taken because it felt like the brand was taking responsibility for it. And then that became kind of like a collective climate action that was happening. So we then moved from consumer pays to brand pays, which has been a very successful shift for us. And in that, we found that there are 2 to 3 particular industries where we find the Climes API product specifically is doing well. I think the reason for that is the Climes API product is quite passive in that it runs quietly by itself once it's integrated. And this works really well with an industry like mobility, like logistics, and like payment layers. So it allows for the product to act as a layer over all these activities that occur repeatedly, small payments that happen every day, flights that are being taken, shipments that are going, and allows for to collect a large amount of people and finance across many different categories.
Yeah, and the B2B2C approach that we had of reaching consumers is now actually found its way into B2B as well. For example, Sabha, you talked about logistics and mobility. For logistics, we're now working with logistics companies that are offering carbon footprints on shipments to their own business customers, right? Like Nifty 50 companies that are using a logistics company to track their own shipments. And I think the versatility of the APIs is actually quite incredible because it's always a two-part process: show carbon footprint and then apply the carbon, the credit in the form of the client credit. And it's just so versatile in that it works day and night once it's running.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how the comms change from between B2B to C and B2B. So, for example, you're saying like you're showing a carbon footprint to an individual customer who is taking a flight or a bus through your company. Then you are positioning the brand yourself, you're positioning as like a green brand that is enabling the consumer to have that part of their life be sustainable. So me as a consumer using this brand, I can fly sustainably because I can offset the emissions of my flight. Similarly, in a B2B case, a logistics company, for example, can position itself as the green part of their customer's supply chain. So all shipments that go through that company are automatically green because that logistics company has chosen to integrate this feature. And I think that's really powerful on both ends of the relationship for both the customer and the brand.
Who are some of the hero brands and hero enterprises that we should give a shout out to on this Wrapped episode, who have been just champions for climate action in whatever shape and form, and they've just stuck with it, whether it's with Climes or not, but who deserves a shout out over here?
I think it's so important that you brought that up because we've always said it's not a difficult industry that we're working in, especially when you're trying to convince people to care about an issue like this. But what really has kept us going is that we have these hero brands and people that we've met along the way that seem to bring like 100 other people along with them when they make that decision. And I think one of those is definitely Fireside Ventures, who have been a partner with us on multiple carbon neutral events. But also, I find that in their value for good messaging and belief, they are very similar to us in that they want to encourage people to be incentivized to do climate action. They want to bring people forward into this revolution, and people like a company like that or an organization like that is super powerful. One of our favorite brands, of course, is also Tamarind Chutney. Tamarind Chutney has been with us along the ride from the beginning, adjusting to our shifts and taking them on, and really I think coming on the journey with us because they're one of those brands that just have sustainability built into their DNA, and they're so open to doing whatever they can to really move with the times and take it to the next level every time.
Amazing. So that's a snapshot of our evolution on how we bring in different forms of capital, identify money wherever it sits, and then really incentivize the holder of that capital to kickstart their own climate journey and then increase climate wallet share. And while that works well, it does bring in small amounts of capital consistently and not sufficient amounts. We'll get to how we're trying to solve the volume problem a little bit later in this episode. But there's one big insight that we learned this year, very early this year, that we have now had to solve for, which is it's not just a capital problem, it's actually a shortage of high quality projects.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Can you paint a little bit of color on that? And we're going to bring on Sid, to dive more into it. But what was the key insight over here? Like, what is the shortage of projects?
Sure. So I think what was really valuable for us as a company, starting as a consumer facing company first, was that our goal at the beginning was to sell the idea of a carbon credit or sell carbon removal to an average individual customer. And the average individual customer's demand for quality, for understanding, for connection to what is happening on the ground is very different to a large corporate. And in that target audience, we realized that we need to have very high quality projects on the ground that can meet the demands on the other side. And as we were going along in the year, we felt that the quality of the projects that existed in the market was just not meeting up to that. We needed to have far more visibility and transparency on what was happening on the ground. We needed to tell the story in the way that the person felt emotionally connected to the work that they were doing. It couldn't just be money going into a black hole. And in order to solve for this, we then moved from just aggregating other projects to what we now do, which is originating our own. In this way, we have far more control over the quality of the project, and we have far more control over the content that comes out from it.
So we're now going to have Sid come on for a deeper dive into why we've really become an origination company as well. So we started off as a finance company, and then we realized there's a shortage of high quality projects. We're going to unpack what does high quality mean. But thanks, Sabah. See you in a bit. Sid, what is a high quality project?
Yeah, I mean,
There's a term thrown around a lot in the carbon markets. I think a lot of people are trying to understand what differentiates one project from the other, right? What is a high quality project?
yeah, I think in my view, a high quality project is one where, across the board, there's environmental, social, and economic impact that is being created for stakeholders on the ground, right? And in our case, if we're working in nature-based projects, it is, are we really benefiting the farmer in the long run, right? And how are we going about doing that as well, right? Balancing their short-term needs to what would be best for their long-term enablement. That's one. Two is ensuring that there's trust and transparency across all stakeholders, right from the ones who are financing these projects to the ones that are maintaining the carbon layer of the project, which in most cases are folks like us. And then obviously the most important is how do we then to the end farmer sort of showcase what the benefits are, right? So that's with regard to nature-based solutions, right? Across the board, like, if you look at technology-based solutions, what's high quality is, one is the project additional, two is their permanence, which is the carbon that is stored, does it have longevity or no? And third is making sure whatever numbers that are being reported are calculated in the most robust manner. So I think that's what to me constitutes a high quality project, right?
And additionality, permanence, if you could just give a brief description of what those terms also mean, because that's typically what the non-carbon market folks get initiated with.
Yeah, additionality is essentially the finance that is being mobilized and deployed really going to add meaningful value to that project, or would the project happen without this carbon finance or no, is the yardstick of measuring additionality, right? Permanence is once the carbon that is stored, either it's below ground soil in case of regenerative agriculture, or above ground biomass in terms of agroforestry and afforestation. That's how permanent is the carbon that's going to be stored, is what is the definition of permanence in terms of our industry.
Number of years, right? So like 100 years or beyond, or 1,000 years or beyond.
Yep. Measured in number of years. Essentially,
which is really important, because we want to not just build projects, we want to incentivize their long-term preservation, because that long-term preservation is what captures that carbon away for a long period of time, right? If you build a carbon project and then it's completely, tilled or destroyed from whatever reason, man-made reason or nature-based reason, 3 years in, all that carbon gets released back, and you're basically undoing all the work that has been done in sequestering the carbon. So permanence is extremely important. And I think this was one of the core insights we had, which is there are not enough high quality additional permanent projects being built that are incentivized for long-term preservation, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So
just to add to that, right? The honest truth is, when we started off a year and a half ago, we thought that, um, aggregation itself would be enough of value addition in this market, right? Aggregation and sifting through and solving for trust through aggregation would be enough. But like most marketplaces, either it's demand constrained or supply constrained. In our case, we also found that especially in this part of the world, it's definitely supply constraint. Just because obviously one, the industry itself is relatively new, and two is the guidelines that are set by the regulators or the so-called quasi-regulators in the industry are so stringent that it's really hard to for just local implementation partners and NGOs to really adhere to, right? So I think a culmination of all of that is what led us to start looking at origination middle of last year, and I think this year has been like a great focus on that, and at the end of the year, pretty happy with what we've achieved.
yeah, we keep getting asked a lot about why our projects are in India or our focus on project development is in India. Paint some light on why are we doing our projects in India? What is India's potential as a carbon sink? Maybe even like touch upon the social cost of carbon. Any way you want to take that.
Yeah, so I mean, why Climes is focused on India is, I think, obviously, given we have vast agrarian land, I think there's enough of an opportunity to continue to scale in India, right? The government itself has indicated that they intend to create close to about 2.5 to 3 billion tons of just nature-based carbon sinks alone, right? Being a small part of that journey itself could help us create the necessary environmental, social, and economic impact that we set out to do, right? Which is why we focused on India. Obviously, taking into account various risks, etc. We have diversified across different parts of India. There's central India, there's south of India that we have, and parts of our projects are in the north as well. But yeah, I mean, it makes more sense because I think we're closer to our implementation partners here. If we are walking the talk on quality, it's better for us to be close to where our projects are, and that's one of the reasons. Obviously, I think there is a well-known statistic that we continue to quote that as the climate problem gets deeper, the social cost of carbon is the highest in India, right? I think you know the exact number, Ani, but
Yeah,
it's north of
$86 a ton.
$86 a ton, which then means that we are going to be affected the most as a country as the climate problem deepens, right? Hopefully, doing a little bit to sort of lessen that burden is something that inspired us more to continue to stay in India for a while. But yeah, excited to work with these farmers across different states in India.
Yeah, and particularly for nature-based solutions, India has a lot of potential. Like we only focus on the land-based solutions right now. Regenerative agriculture was our first use case, but we're doubling down. Agroforestry is our second. We have not even gotten to the ocean-based solutions yet. I think that will hopefully and perhaps be in our journey somewhere in the future. There's a lot of potential with mangrove and kelp and seaweed, but we're not there yet. Just land-based, so much potential, especially because India has been a very agrarian economy. So, what are the contours of a project to be developed? If you can give us a couple of steps from discovery of where to discovery of project partner, how does the project actually get built? And once it is, let's talk about some co-benefits too, because I think the co-benefits part is extremely important just beyond carbon removal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just in terms of the way we look at it, right? The areas that we're working when potentially wanting to work with or work in, right? Do they have enough scale, right? Or do they have number of farmers that really could potentially switch to either regenerative agriculture, or do they have land that's ripe for good quality agroforestry to be produced? Second is, are there enough good local implementation partners that could work with farmers who build inherent trust with these farmers, right? a large part of how we choose our implementation partner is the relationships that they have with local farmers on the ground. Because these are just 20-year-old 20-year-old projects, right? Like when we sign up farmers, we sign up with them for 20 odd years. So in that sense, we look at various parameters: land, what potential crops could be grown; three, what is the sequestration value; fourth is, if we're working there, what is, like you mentioned, what are the other co-benefits, right? Like do we like working in areas where livelihoods slash incomes are very, very low? Absolutely, yes, because that's where we think the capital stands to add more value per dollar sort of deployed in these areas. Second is, you know, is there any gender issue that could be solved along the way, right? We do have affinity towards areas where, there are women farmers who are working in these areas, just so that we try and bring as much parity. Third is looking at the biodiversity aspect as well, right? In all of our projects, I'm proud to say that, we tend to stick to a mix of native species plus perennial species to ensure biodiversity and improve quality of soil, right? Just to give you an indication, in one of our land areas, we did not anticipate improved fertility in the first year itself, and that's already happened, right? Like things like these around what the co-benefits are is also what excites us. We've been very conservative in terms of the way we've onboarded farmers compared to most other project developers in this space, just because we want to ensure that we factor in all of these different criteria and parameters before we go ahead.
I think that's really important to share, because people typically assume carbon sinks are only for carbon removal, when there are actually lots and lots of co-benefits. Biodiversity is a huge co-benefit. It just doesn't get priced. Today, there's not a fixed way of pricing it, so we don't add that in. And that's why people don't really put a value on it, but it's huge. Right? We have to have a biodiversity, revolution to really renew nature and bring back species of all kinds that are local to a particular place. And beyond that, of course, there are other co-benefits too, right? Improved soil health, improved fertility, improved, agricultural output, and eventually improve farmer incomes. So there's a huge spillover effect of doing any one carbon project. And Climes lives by the motto of carbon and community benefit. I think that's going to continue to be a huge part of every single project that we evaluate and that we build. These projects will get built, but what they really need is a lot of capital. How are you seeing, over the last 1 year, the conversation around financing nature evolve?
Yeah, I think if there's one positive takeaway from this year, obviously, it has been a challenging year in that sense for the carbon markets, right? We talked about quality. I think a large part of the projects that weren't high integrity, high quality did end up getting some slack from various parts of the media, right? There was a lot of negative information that was sort of spread on the voluntary carbon markets this year. With that being said, the big positive was, large corporates, large governments, large institutions are all seeing the value of nature. They're trying to price it to their best ability. Obviously, pricing something like nature is very, very heterogeneous. So I think all of us will go through our own learning curves on how to price it. But the fact that some of these conversations have become mainstream with large sustainability teams at large corporates, with different kinds of environmental trading desks in large hedge funds, large financial institutions, banks, etc., is a good sign in the market, right? And I think that's only going to grow as climate change becomes more and more visible. And yeah, I mean, for folks like us who are developing and helping originate projects in India, it's only good that people around the globe are starting to value this, starting to recognize that more private capital, more commercial capital should be deployed into this space. Obviously, things need to evolve, but through the year we've seen lots of different organizations be more open to even hearing out the case for nature and how we could commercialize it.
Yeah, and you talked about how there's been a lot of negative press this year. The Guardian had a huge impact on how the carbon markets took a hit. The New Yorker had one big piece about one of the biggest players in the space. I'm going to name who, but that was a real negative signal in the market. Then Down to Earth did a very, very solid piece on, lots of carbon players in the market that have been of the past vintage, brought in projects, carbon projects of all sorts in the last 10 years. And overall, I think a lot of people are affected by it, but we tend to believe that press looking at this space actually identifies weaknesses in the market. And that has allowed the entire system to get far healthier, right? There has been a lack of full transparency. There's been a lack of credibility. There's been a lack of what is high quality. And it's because these questions are being asked that now everyone's banding together to solve them. Individual companies are being built around specific problems in the value chain. And I think that's a net positive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Net positive for sure.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think this has been a turbulent year for the carbon markets, but going forward, it's going to be far healthier going into 2024.
Yeah, overall, I think it's far more positive, at least for our generation of originators, right? We are overcoming the problems that that some of the incumbents faced while helping create the market, and that itself is positive, and the market itself is fairly new, so I think there will be mistakes made along the way, and it's for folks like us to correct and hopefully bring more integrity to this market and then see more capital coming through and through. So I'm overall, while it seems in hindsight that, oh shit, we had a very tough and long year for the voluntary carbon markets, I think it's also necessary to go through these peaks and troughs before really the market stabilizing.
100%. So this has also been, 2023 has been a big year for Climes in terms of being offline. We have been everywhere offline. We've shown up, at all sorts of events. I want to actually start with the most relevant one, which was our site visit. So our offline site visit for a project that we have been financing and supporting with our consumer brand and enterprise play for the last year and a half. Let's dive into it. Where did we go? What happened with this site? How is this a pilot for the kind of projects that we're talking about that will eventually become large-scale agroforestry carbon sinks? So what happened with the site visit, and then paint.
Yeah, absolutely. This site that we visited was in Maharashtra, right? And this is actually financed by a lot of consumers and brands that worked with us through of last year, right? The Make My Trips, the Yatras, the Zing buses, Neemans of the world, right? And obviously the almost 100,000 plus consumers that they helped neutralize through us. And this is, an agroforestry land where we've mixed a mix of, annual plus perennial crops. The farmer who we work with, has, potentially tens of acres of land, and we took percentage of his land to, and this is degraded land. We took his degraded land to sort of put together this combination of agroforestry that we have. It's a mix of horticulture crops and bamboo on the bunds. Yeah, he was really grateful that he could grow something with his degraded land. He did not have the income to grow something. And the fact that we enabled this through carbon finance, where we get to keep the carbon sequestration that's going to happen here, but he gets to keep the income from produce, something that he really endorsed. And this actually has given us the confidence to scale that scale it 20x the next year, and that's what I'm excited about. And more stories like this from on the ground of our farmers is what we hope to enable through carbon financing, and that's what excites me about Climes and what we do here.
I think the story here it's really, really remarkable because it was a small pilot, 2 acres if I'm not wrong.
5
acres that we started, like Sid said, degraded land. We got it financed with consumer capital coming in through different brands, and this has actually become a pilot for us to scale up 20x and then beyond. For a large-scale agroforestry project. And imagine India where we've replicated this across different states, right? Boosting farmer incomes and improving carbon captured within the topsoil and even above ground biomass. I think it's a win-win situation. We're really going for that climate goal as well as economic goal, or as we say, environmental, social, and economic development. So this is a really cool case study. This project's available on the Climes platform. Please go have a look at it if you would like to know more details. This site visit was really cool for us as a team because actually it really allowed us to see the fruit of our labor that we've been doing for the last year and a half. And this got us pumped to replicate this a million times over. Sid, what are some of the other events that we showed up for this year? And how has that influenced our thinking? We went for McKinsey, Green Business Summit, we went to COP28, we went for GITEX. Let's talk about some of the events we were at.
Yeah, no, this has been the first year since we started where we wanted to show our external presence, starting with AITA in Bilbao to then the New York Climate Summit to the McKinsey Green Business Building Summit, and in between that a lot of the impact investment summits and COP28 to wrap up the year. I think it's been a phenomenal year of learning. I think each time we go to these events, our mind opens up on what are the infinite possibilities of bringing capital from global north to the global south, which is exactly the mission with which we started off in. So overall, I think we'll continue to do this as we grow as an institution and hopefully get better represented as well as we grow. So it's been great that, for a company that started off in India to now start to make their presence outside of India, and hopefully, like I said, through the years, have a more meaningful presence as well here, and that's what I'm super keen about going into the next couple of years.
And it's been honestly inspiring to see how many more people are looking at the space, talking about the space, wanting to do stuff within the carbon space and specifically nature. Whether it's consulting firms like McKinsey, or it's sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East, or whether it's consumer brands, or whether it's large financial institutions, it's extremely inspiring.
Yep, including enterprises, right? Some of the leading blue chip enterprises. So, no, I think, like I said, we need to deepen those relationships, and we're very excited for what's coming through next year.
Yeah, I'm going to go into the increased need for transparency, but just before I get there, with the framing of the market, what we've learned micros wise, building Climes, and then apply the macros of the entire market. What are the known knowns going into next year? The unknown unknowns? Yeah, what do you see? What have we learned that we know for sure is going to happen? And what do we absolutely not know may happen?
Yeah, I think what we know is going to happen is, I think with Article 6, showing strides of improvement, with integrity on the demand side being sort of, at least for now, at the end of COP being aggregated, and there's one sort of standard that's going to be set amongst these standards. I think more corporates will be open to putting in more capital towards carbon removal, right? I think there has to be supply side standardization, which I hope will happen soon with Vera Gold Standard, Puro, and a bunch of other registries that are there. But I think one thing for sure I'm certain is, as in when the integrity side of the piece gets solved on demand, which I think we're more or less on our way, there will be more capital that will flow into projects. Two is, I think, and this is something that a lot of people talked about this year, I think, to change that word from voluntary to verified, right? In the carbon market itself is going to open up more doors, and hopefully that's something is in the works in the next couple of years as well. Obviously, Singapore has started off well, sort of saying we would absorb a certain percentage of credits from voluntary carbon markets as we move towards our net zero goals, right? Things like that are an added boost to our industry. I think challenges, there will continue to be, some of these questions on integrity, transparency, etc., etc. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. That is going to sort of keep keep the market grounded, I think, rather than having irrational exuberance, which I think is a good thing for us. And yeah, I mean, overall, I expect more and more action on the VCM next year than this year, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. And I truly believe, and this is something that I've said from day one, like the more the transparency that comes into the market, the lagging indicator of this would be the volumes of capital that comes in, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, we are obsessed about transparency. And at this point, I would, sort of want to segue into bringing Hardik, who is one of the engineers on the team. Hi, Hardik. Would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, hey everyone. So I'm Hardik, and I'm in the engineering team. And from the beginning of the Climb's journey, I have been here building products as and such. And I've seen the entire journey of how we have started as in uh, going towards the demand side first, and then coming catering different various products to different types of services, right?
Yeah, I want to specifically, I know year one we spoke and touched upon a lot of the demand side features around how, like, for every rupee dollar that's been invested through from a consumer or a brand or an enterprise or a financier, right? Like we built the features of rupee level, kilo level transparency the first year, but this year was more on the supply side, right? Where we ended up building high integrity sort of MRV solutions, right? I'd love for you to sort of go through some of the slides on what we've built, and also talking through what have been some of your key learnings on building trust and transparency, towards a farmer-centric product.
Okay, so let me begin that by showcasing our product, right? Which we have built to a large to scale to a large extent, right? When we come to India, right, working in India, it is a challenge. As in, we have so many small scale farmers who are trying to work with us, right? Versus when we go abroad, right, they have large their farmers are having large scale of lands, right? So their numbers are less, but they have large scale of land. But in India, when we work with Indian farmers, the land holding area is smaller, but we have very large scale of numbers of farmers who are willing to work with us, right? So for that, we have built a DMRV product, right, which we can onboard any farmer super easily, super fast, and it is super light and robust, right? So it is simply just going into the farmer's land and asking him give this data and just onboarding him. It is such simple, right? And then we are catering. See, in the supply side, we have two different products, right? One which caters to the farmer's needs, as in how to onboard him, how to see his all data has been collected properly. And second piece is the verification piece, right? Wherein we have to verify all the data is correct. Then we have to see to it that 20 years of data has been collected properly or not, and how what data is managed when, who is updating the data, and all that piece, right? So we have that built into our product as well, right? And let me highlight some of the key features, right, which we have built into this product. So one, it is super lightweight, because we have to see that we are collecting over 100 data points, right? So we have to make sure it is not a bulky and super heavy to use. So we have made it so lightweight such that any non-techie field officers could also onboard any farmer, right? And it could be super fast. That process is really fast. And while we are doing this kind of process with the onboarding multiple farmers while going on to the site, we have faced many challenges. Like, there are some few places in India, right, where there is no remote internet, right, in those places. So we have built some very superb features which are offline functionality. So any field agent will be able to onboard any farmer, even though he or she might not have any internet connection at that time, right? So if you ask me, that's super cool, right? And some of the key learnings that I would like to highlight over here is the transparency bit is what we are trying to solve for, right? So we have built this product in such a way that in any given point of time we will know what data is where, who has edited it, when it was edited, by whom and how, and every single point, right? So no matter what we do, we will know each and every bit who has done and what has made that change available, right? And also one of the key things is, since India is so digitalized and tech first, right? Farmers are really willing to adopt these practices, as well as it is easier for them to do this as well because of our products, right? And because of the digitalized era that we live in, right? We have the UPI, unified payment interface, which has revolutionized the payment, right? So now we can make sure ki the farmers who are having like whom the payment needs to reach can be reached super easily and hassle free, right? So we are trying to we have built this feature into our product as well, which can give out hassle free payments to the farmers, right? And directly pass on the benefits to the community directly to farmers.
Got it. I have one question for you, right? Which is, what excites you as you think through building product for next year?
So this year basically our main focus was on to capturing the data and representing it and making sure the data was in line, and making sure the transparency bit was in place, right, before moving on to the next. So now our next year's our main focus is to make sure the verification piece of this entire DMRV product is on place, right? So what I mean by that is, let's say by using satellite data, by using our product as well as the satellite data integrated to this product, we can make sure ki above and below ground mass is on to the point, right? Wherein we are able to see whether or not the activity has been done or not, those farmers are doing their practices or not.
No. Thanks for that. Yeah, definitely verification is something that we're all excited for, and as a key milestone that we've set internally as well. With that, thanks so much, Hardik. It was great to see some of the screenshots of the product that's been built. I would at this point like to call on Sabah, Ria, and Anirudh back on.
Thanks, Sid. Gen Z. That's what this podcast is called too. The Voice of Generation Climate, TVOGC. Why did we call it that? Ria? I'm back. And you've been the curator of this podcast. We're episode 26 in. You've done 25 before this with some amazing guests. It started off really as a definition for the podcast, but it's taken on a whole new meaning. So just start at the top. Gen Z.
Yeah, I think this is something you've also mentioned in a bunch of podcasts before, which is what is Gen Z, right? I think early on we identified that there's no one person, no one stakeholder, or there's no demographic that limits who can be Gen Z. And Generation Climate is anyone who's willing to work for the climate and for a better future, right? And I think even within our target audience, we've seen that evolution. We started catering to a certain target audience and building clients for that, and then realized what works better for us in terms of maximizing the output and moving a lot more clients, right? And I think any and everybody can be Gen Z.
Yeah, I think Gen Z is the term we came up with to kind of define the community that we as a company were looking for. And as we've spoken, like how we went from consumers to B2B to C to B2B, all across, Gen Z has remained a constant, I think. And that's what Ria was talking about, that it doesn't need to be an individual or a consumer brand or even a sustainable brand. Like it can be any kind of actor which is willing to make the change or willing to work for climate. And in the industry that we're in, with so much uncertainty still, I think it's the most powerful thing to actually have is a community behind you. And specifically for us, that is Gen Z. And in everything that we've continued to curate it and build it so that no matter which direction we go in, we always have that collection of people that are all working on the same goal. And while Gen Z for us currently is, the people that we are connected to. Also, I feel like having been to COP28 just this month, in fact, there was a very strong atmosphere there of people from all over the world, all working on different parts of the climate problem, and all equally ambitious and ready to solve it. And just to be in that atmosphere, that for me felt like an expansion of what Gen Z should be and will be in the future.
Yeah, and I think this reminds me of something Anshuman Bapna had brought up earlier on in one of our episodes, where he was talking about why they built Terra.do, right? And one of the reasons was that it becomes quite lonely when you're working on this problem, because every day you're reading the news, it's so sad, this is happening there, that is happening there. It's really grim and sad, and there's a lot of loneliness within the community. So when you're with people who are also working towards the same mission, that energy just amplifies and motivates you to do a lot more.
Yeah, fully agreed. It's not Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen C. Gen Z is, it's a movement for sure. Like it is, and people got to know that they're not alone in taking that action. It could be any action, right? You're taking a sustainability focused class, that's one action. You're, eating hydroponically grown food, that's one action. There's so many different actions we can take, and they all stack up, right? And we've heard lots of versions of this through the conversations we've had on this podcast itself. Sabha, Ria, who are some of the champions we've had come across that have really stood out? They're part of our Gen Z community, whether they've been on the podcast or not. What communities are we a part of? Who we had on the podcast? Paint a picture of the people who've been involved, right? Let's take some names, and Sabha gave a shout out to Fireside Fan Project Baker's Dozen earlier, but who else?
And Tamarind Chutney, of course.
And Tamarind Chutney.
So I think we also recently joined UICCA, which is UAE's independent climate change accelerator. To see even traditional societies want to do something on climate is really inspiring. So I think I wanted to give a shout out to that community. And within our communities, I think we've had so many different types of people from different types of companies who've shared their insights. We've had some guests from the media industry. So the Better India, the co-founder, had joined us. We'd also had Varsha from Shebang, who was talking about how even consumer brands are wanting to be more sustainable, because there is a demand from the end consumer. So I feel like each and every individual, we might not be able to name out each and every one of those individuals, but everyone has had a role to play in where we are today and where we're going to be.
Of course, the two podcasts that I did were with people who have different versions of my name, which is a running joke. First with Sabrish from WRI, which I really enjoyed because that gives a completely different perspective to even the regular consumer brands that we work with on how organizations like World Resources Institution are attempting to bring this conversation of carbon neutralization and climate within their own circles, and how for Sabrish the carbon neutral events product was a very effective way for him to communicate what carbon neutralization is and to bring people from different aspects of the industry together and understand through action what it is that people are trying to educate them about. And then my second podcast was with Shiva, who runs the forestation project in Uttarakhand. And that was for me a really interesting and exciting episode too, because Shiva gave us a lot of insights about how on the ground, the struggles that she faces, the challenges that she has to go through to try and get, something such a good on paper project good, but when you try and implement it on the ground, there are a lot of things that come in the way, and that then feeds into what actually it takes to build a high quality project and the level of attention to detail that we need to have as a company, not just to operations, but also to culture and society and how people are actually involved in the project as well. Yeah, and I think that's what the coolest thing about Gen Z is, like whatever part of the world you come from or what industry you're in, you have a perspective on the same problem. And that's what we want to collect through the podcast, is that all those different perspectives, because they're all going to help us actually arrive at the most effective solutions. Yeah,
we've had some completely different sectoral experts also who've been part of Gen Z. For example, like one of my favorite episodes to do was with Pratham at Masters Union, and he brought in that educational lens as an educational institution builder. And that was so cool because their climate journey actually started like I think a year and a half ago, and now Masters Union as a business school is introducing a sustainability ventures program where their students get to launch new sustainability ventures, right? And like just that journey of becoming a Gen Z institution started by one Gen Z individual. It's a power of like a Kickstarter or that big inflection point. Individuals can be inflection points within institutions. Similarly with Priya at Thea Ventures, right? As a fund, she is introducing climate action within portfolio companies. And I think the power of that individual who's a Gen Z to turn an institution into a Gen Z institution, and then that has ripple effects, is just amazing. And that's the power of movements. So it's really inspiring, and I hope we've had 25 so far in this year. Maybe we have another 25, 50 next year. And we can't wait to find out who these new people are going to be that we find to be fire starters in society. It's also been very difficult to like talk to all these audiences. How we manage to capture the messaging that we are at today. We didn't start with the messaging we have. The vision has remained the same, right? But how we actually evolved our messaging and how we managing to communicate to brands, enterprises, financial institutions all at the same time. Want to hear your opinion, and then Ria, yours too, because you lead our marketing. So let's go from comms to marketing.
Sure. So, of course, given that the TG has changed over time, the way we've spoken about carbon neutrality, about climate has also changed significantly over time. I think we started off by spending a lot of time trying to communicate, what carbon neutrality is, how it works, and what it means for a person. But over time, I think what has been most beneficial is to kind of relate carbon neutrality to a person's life and to their own sort of goals. So the kind of language that we're not so focused on the details, the technicalities of it, and more sort of the story and the meaning and the significance of what people are doing when they're contributing to climate. For example, now with our focus on nature-based solutions, everyone can kind of relate to replenishing and regenerating nature, and in whatever way that they're doing that, the overall goal is something that is common for everyone, whether they're an enterprise or an individual on the ground. So I think over time it was about finding what everybody kind of would be attracted to and would want to see, and then for them to visualize that eventual goal. That's the kind of messaging that we've been focusing on.
Because it sounds like it is a complex subject. Trying to
Very
really
complex.
Get your projects to be built and then bring capital into them. It's a long value chain.
Yeah.
But it's hard to simplify it, right? So how we managed to do that over time has been quite a challenge. But we're doing it. We're making progress. In fact, we have updated our website. Please check it out, climes.io.
Yes.
It's a whole new messaging out there.
Yeah, it's a lot about like learning about what that first layer of information should be. And I think earlier we had got wrapped up in, okay, it has to be a direct explanation of what we're actually talking about, but people can tap into that as they get further along. The first thing that people want to see is what they want to visualize as the future. And I think that's what we've gone for with the kind of style of the website as well. Like first feel wrapped up in the movement and then tap into the further details of it.
Beautiful. First feel, say that again, first feel wrapped up.
First feel wrapped up in the movement, yeah. And then, like self-select into more information, which is why Gen Z is so powerful, right? Because if you feel part of Generation Climate, you're already on board, then whatever you want to learn about specific projects or specific like types of emissions, etc., that's, secondary. But first and foremost, yeah, it's a movement.
Amazing. Yeah, we have one nugget right there. What about you? What are you thinking on our evolution of messaging, and how are we conveying this complex message in a simple way?
So I think the first and foremost thing is that there's a lot more emphasis on collaboration within the team and outside as well. And this is something we've known, is that this is not a one-person problem, right? No one person, organization or team can solve this problem. So everybody in the industry needs to join hands and figure out a solution that works for all of us. So I think even within what we're doing and how we're communicating, we're not trying to gatekeep any information. We're trying to be as transparent as possible about each and everything, whether that is our learnings, our challenges, etc. I think we can see this across the industry. The fact that multiple standards have joined hands and are willing to come up with principles and standards that are going to have that are going to improve the integrity of the market itself, right? I think that it's trickling down, and each and every organization sees that. So I think that is one thing I wanted to highlight because it is something that comes up in each and every one of our conversations, even within the team, right? The second thing about simplifying it is, I think that's how we as a team function as well, right? We're always thinking of first principles. We're always trying to think of the problem, simplify it instead of using jargons and thinking of all of that. We just try to simplify the problem, find the first principles and figure it out. And that's what we're doing exactly with marketing also, right? And I think the fact that that's how we're operating as a team automatically gets reflected on how we're communicating. Whether that is something that's happening in the news, right? We read that and we try to explain that to our parents who don't know what it is, right? So I think that's the approach we're taking actively, which is how would you communicate this to an audience that isn't really primed about the market as well. So yeah.
No, really, really insightful, because this is a constant question that keeps coming up to us as well. How do you communicate something that's invisible? Carbon is invisible, like you can't even see, it's not tangible, right? And then communicating that, and then communicating incentives and beyond, it's obviously complex, but like we live for that, right? And our job is constantly half done because we always have more to do to figure out how to communicate it even better, right? We're never fully done communicating it. So yeah, like for the last segment of Gen Z, we've talked about lots of external stakeholders, customers, partners, investors, different institutions who we work with. But really the main Gen Z for us is people on the team. Everything we do is a function of the people who have joined us along the way. And we call our Gen Z teammates Climates. So I'm going to invite Sid and Hardik back into the room. And Sid, let's talk about what Gen Z within the team used to look like early on, how it changed along the way, and where we're at now in the 2.5 year journey.
As we go through our different journeys, I think the way we structure teams, the way we scale teams as well, changes. And just from what we've seen from the time we started 2.5 years ago, we had a bunch of generalists who were keen to throw themselves at any new problem that we were excited by, right? And obviously, as in when we evolved along the journey, it became very clear where our sort of competitive moats are going to be at. And gradually through the year, we've seen certain generalists take on specialist roles in the company, and obviously for us to now also bring on more specialists in the organization, right? Just to give the audience a sense, when we started off, we would hire hungry individuals, some in their early 20s, some in their late 20s. So now, we hire specific PhDs for specific roles on carbon quantification, or specific, folks in technology who could come ahead and solve the geospatial data problems that we have, right? So I think that transition has been fascinating for someone like me who gets to see this through the years, and I think as we grow through the years as well, it's going to be a mix of generalists and specialists who'd come in and fill some of the roles on the problems that we're solving, and that's exactly what excites us, that getting the right people to solve the right problems. And for us, Generation C is again, I think I'd like to reiterate it. When we defined that term, we said we don't want it to be limited by age, don't want it to be limited by any other criteria apart from the fact that you want to come and give it your best shot at helping solve for the climate. And along the way, there are more and more stakeholders that we'd like to get involved in. That's what excites me, partly as being someone here on the Climes journey.
Awesome. Just last thoughts from each person around the room. What's in store for 2024? What are we most excited about? Where are we headed as a company?
Yeah. For me, what I'm excited about is moving more capital and working with more and more farmers on the ground. Being at the intersection of that and able to like exponentially grow what we've built from this year to the next year is what excites me, and I'm excited to be a part of that journey.
Three things for me. I feel like in 2024 will be the year that we actually see impact at scale that we have created. And I'm very excited to see that live, because like we were talking before, the most important thing is to be able to see the impact that we're creating. And I feel like that's really going to come to fruition next year. Secondly, with the demand products, how they've evolved, the kind of industries we're entering into, the kind of customers we now have, I do feel like a bit of a global expansion is starting. We're starting to move into different markets, see interest from around the world. And I'm very excited to make those connections and start really like bringing Climes out onto the front stage. And thirdly, like we were talking before about Gen Z, I feel like a lot of the stuff we've been doing, given being a company that started in the pandemic times, has been very virtual. And in 2024, everything is coming front and center, face to face, in physical events, physical meetings, and just being a lot more out there. And I'm personally very excited to be there doing that, going forward in the next year.
Yeah, I agree with Sabah. I was going to mention those things specifically. But I think apart from that, what I'm really excited about is also something that Sid brought up earlier about how when we're working with farmers, it's a long-term partnership with them. We don't just onboard them and like figure it out. They don't just become numbers or figures on our screen, right? So continuing those conversations with farmers and communities on ground and really seeing the results of what we've been doing over the past year and so excited to visit all of these communities again and again over the next year.
So for me, I'm really excited to see as in how we are going to scale our product, right? From doing let's say a lakh of farmer to a crore of farmer, like pan India, right? So I'm really excited to see our product being utilized by crores of farmers of India, and getting the transparency bit out.
Amazing. For me, also, it's a little bit of an overlap with some of your answers. Number one is celebrating our Gen Z community hard. Like, we need to celebrate all our brands, enterprise, all our partners. And we're going to do one version of it as an absolute banger of a celebration in April. More to come on that. And we'll do a lot more of those offline events. I think the second one is really like building large-scale nature-based projects that are additional, permanent, high quality, and getting financial institutional capital to bank them and support them. So we, start de-risking nature significantly. And the third one is, I think with our API plays, really doubling down on mobility, logistics, and payment gateways. I think there's a lot of potential over there for these nodes to be opened up across the internet, across society, so that more and more capital is consistently coming into the world of climate. And that kind of summarizes everything we do. We're a finance company, we're a nature-based project builder, and now we're stitching the two, upstream to downstream. It's a long value chain we're building. We're a team of about 16 people right now, and we're just getting started. This has been a wonderful, long year for us, very, very challenging, but we will keep you all updated on progress that Climes makes as we go forward. Thank you so much for being with us today, guys. Really appreciate your time.